and welcome along to the VMTV Rugby Pod as we review the Lions series as a whole. Alan Quinlan back from his jollies and his travels. I'm sure there's a bit of jet lag in there, but overall, Alan, a loss at the weekend in what was a test match we've probably never seen before. Lightning strikes, weather, but Australia much better. But the Lions, if you had said to them, the outcome will be a 2-1 victory, Andy Farrell, I am sure, and his team would have taken it as much as they wanted the 3-0 whitewash. As a spectacle, it was a bit on Saturday night's defeat.
Yeah, they certainly would have taken it beforehand. Stuart, I think obviously you saw the reaction the week before when they won the series, the celebration. We heard about the celebrations. We felt it in Melbourne. They were, big celebrations in the team hotel right throughout the night, Sunday as well, and not so sure about Monday, but they celebrated it and it was a great achievement. It's exactly what they wanted to do, is win the series. So as the week shifted, I think, initially you're thinking it's going to be a dead week because the Lions have won the series. Australia dropped the heads a bit, psychologically scarred, all that kind of stuff, the way they lost the match in the end. But as the week went on, you could sense that there was a lot to play for here, and that there was going to be a desperation and a real reaction from Australia, and try and build on what they'd got better at from test 1 to test 2, and you felt that was a big motivating factor to try and not lose the series 3-0. Obviously, for Andy Farrell and his team, it was to finish off in style, and that would have been the perfect scenario for them. But yeah, it was a crazy match. The weather was absolutely horrific. I'd never ever experienced the monsoon rains that were there before the game. About 2 hours before the game, there was a couple of heavy showers. I was out at the stadium early, probably an hour before kickoff. I was outside the stadium and there was music playing and it wasn't raining, and I think people were hopeful that was the end of it, but an incredibly heavy shower came for about 10 or 15 minutes, and people going into the stadium at that point, and took our seats, and 20 minutes in, then it just was horrendous, really. And I think the match was crazy, because you think, if you were to speak about it, and we did last week about obviously previewing it, but if you were to speak and say, right, there's going to be this sort of bad weather, you think it would suit the Lions more, because their physical approach and that forward pack is very, very abrasive, and dominated the first test. Had moments in the second test that really kind of exerted power and physicality, the crucial moments. That got him back into the game, and then ultimately got him the result in the end. But you think, going into the game the other night, that was my feeling going into the stadium, that this weather is going to suit the Lions a little bit more, and they'll be that bit more physical. Taniela Tupou coming in for Australia, very explosive, very powerful. Would he last? How long would he last from a fitness point of view? Will Skelton will probably 50 minutes as well. Would he be better? Could he keep going? And would it tell in the end, that bit of power and physicality? But I tell you, the Australians really stood up. They were excellent. And, they got a lucky kind of bounce of the ball with Jorgensen's try. The second one, which really kind of gave them a bit of breathing space and a real belief that they were going to win that test match. But I think they deserved it. You create that little bit of luck. And from the word go and that game on Saturday night in the third test, you felt Australia were just that half a yard sharper and better and quicker and reacted quicker to a lot of stuff that was happening. Was some of it down to a bit of fatigue, a bit of mental fatigue, maybe switching off a little bit? All the stuff I'm sure Andy Farrell would have spoken about that were dangers and threats to the Lions during the week, because it hasn't been done very much, has it, a clean sweep in any series in over the years. The history of that will tell you it's so difficult to stay switched on and focused and get those performances. 3 times in a row in the test matches. So it's always a challenge. I'm sure they covered all that stuff during the week. He didn't make, there's only two changes to the starting lineup. James Ryan and Kinghorn come in. So he kind of stuck with the same core group of players. And in hindsight, should there be more changes? Well, hindsight's a great thing. He said that afterwards, Andy Farrell, but ultimately they got the job done. And in some ways, you felt leaving the stadium after the game that credit to Australia. That's a great end to the series for them, and what was incredibly disappointing the week before, and their reaction was top notch. They were really shrewd in very bad conditions. They made less mistakes. They put so much pressure on the line out, and that was an area that kind of disintegrated for the Lions. They lost a lot of crucial lineouts, and Australia just had that little bit more energy, and they put in a fantastic performance. And
tell us this, Alan. Have you ever seen a like of it where lightning comes into the ground in all your time? And then what do you make of it when they did come off after 42 minutes? And you talked about hindsight. And look, all we can see at home is the pictures. And you're there at the ground and you see Australia go out a wee bit earlier than maybe Tag Furlong and Finn Russell. He was on his mobile phone relaxing. And then Andy Farrell was actually asked about it. And he hit back and said, no, this is exactly what we were told by the S&C or their performance coaches. We will go out 5 minutes before kickoff. Australia maybe went out 10 minutes before. Joe Schmidt smiled on his face this week or the weekend saying he had a lightning plan, and that's what he's all about. What did you think if Andy Farrell had his time back, he would do anything differently, or is that just we're making something out of nothing?
I don't think so. I think, look, the challenge there, Stuart, is obviously you've got to get re-warmed up a little bit. Adrenaline is rushing. I know from my own experience, when you go out and do 30, 40 minutes of a warm-up, in some of it high intensity, some of it just kind of keeping the muscles going, keeping them supple, bit of stretching, all that kind of stuff. You do your lineouts, you do your bit of visualization, all that kind of stuff. You tick those boxes and you make sure that the blood is pumping in the body before a game, whether you have that kind of weather or not. That's normally the plan. I think obviously if you stop for a period of time like that, you can possibly get a little bit static or tighten up a little bit. But the messages we were getting in the stands were that, once the players come back out, there's obviously going to be 10 minutes of a warm-up time. To be honest, again, I've never experienced that kind of stoppage. We had a stoppage one time. We played in a Champions Cup game over against the Scarlets, where the game was stopped for maybe 5 minutes. We kind of went off to the side of the field. Were asked, do we want to play on with sleet and snow? And it was hard to see. And both teams were adamant, well, let's stop wasting time here. We want to play on. And we did. So it was a very short stoppage I would have experienced. But for me, I wouldn't have any issue with players lying out in beanbags, sitting back, checking their phones or whatever. You've got to trust people in that situation. I'm not sure I would be going to my phone in that situation in the middle of a game where you don't know, you might be called in at any stage to get back out and warm up. I would have probably been more interested, I can only speak for this as an individual myself, of probably just staying stretched and relaxed and getting off the wet jersey and stuff like that, drying off a little bit and really trying to relax the mind a little bit, because so I wouldn't have any issue with Finn Russell doing what he did or any of the other players lying out sitting on beanbags. Obviously, when Australia win again, you think, oh God, we've got the situation right here, because Joe spoke about his players staying, switching on and off on bikes inside in their dressing room. I don't think that was the case, because I think ever before that happened, I think Australia just had that tiny little bit more energy. And it's very minute, Stuart. It could be 1 or 2% for lines that they've just not had the same urgency or the same emotional high pitch situation. And no matter how much you want it, sometimes it can just be a tiny little bit off where you need to be. and the opposition then, out of absolute desperation and to try and avoid a whitewash, can be get an extra percent or two the other way, and it makes a difference. It creates that little, whether it's a bit of kick chase, getting off the ground a little bit quicker. And we just saw an Australian team who were so hungry, their work rate was through the roof. When you're kind of watching the game up high and you can see players shooting back into position, pushing each other, real dominant communication. And that's what we saw from Australia. So it begs the question, if their preparation was better, would they have been at a higher intensity for game one?
Well, you've led me on to that perfectly, Alan. You must have read my notes, but we don't know their schedule. We don't know how it all works from the outside with their CEO and their S&Cs and just Joe Schmidt and the planning. But they had one match. There clearly are reasons. Then by the first game, they lost convincingly. I know the scoreline was maybe only 7 or 8 points, but it was done after 43 minutes compared to 2 weeks later. Yes, Valentini was added in, Skelton, and they had their injuries. But the difference was really remarkable. And we all hoped, for a spectacle. If this had gone down to a third test, who knows? But it didn't. Lions won it in 2. But are you shocked, or maybe disappointed's the right word, that in 2 weeks they just performed so much better? Or can that just happen? And what does the dog think?
Yeah, the dogs are going mad here at the minute. Someone's at the door, but no, I think definitely that the preparation wasn't enough. I think, as you say, if Australia had, I think it's based on the evidence of what we see, Stuart, of they were really slow out of the blocks in that first test, and at that point, the Lions had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They had 6 games played. Now, I know the same 15 didn't play every game, but there was a fair bit of rotation. There was structural stuff that they were getting right. There was game plans. There was sharpness in training. So big build-up, big block of preparation there. Had to be battle-hardened. The end of their season, real cohesion and planning when you're in the hotel for kind of 5-6 weeks together like that in the lead-up and all these different games. Little mini groups who can sort out lineouts and plan stuff and come up with ideas. So you've a lot of kind of positive stuff that in the preparation side of things. I did ask the question and I spoke to Laurie Fisher about it, and the problem for Australia was Super Rugby and the Brumbies getting to the knockout stages, and just the way it ran on and the scheduling of that. It inhibited their ability to try and get their squad together and play a couple of matches. Plus, I think if you needed international fixtures, they would have found them. This should have been planned 3-4 years ago, whatever. And I don't think it's a decision that Joe might say, well, we can just play one game and that'll be fine. I think if they had their time back, they'd definitely play a couple of test matches. And but it shouldn't have been allowed to go on that long for Australia. But then there's other stakeholders involved in New Zealand teams and stuff like that. So it's easier said than done. You can't just move around the fixtures and the schedule. But when you have one team that can get 6 games before the first test and the other team has 1 game, that's a problem. It's not rocket science to be able to figure that out. It's like going back at the start of pre-season. I did 15 pre-seasons with Munster. You can do all the fitness you want in the world, all the running, the conditioning, the down and ups, hitting pads, weight training. You need matches. You cannot, and I've never done it before, just go straight in to a first league game. And I think internationals do it now, that the league game of round 3 or 4 of URC sometimes that's their first hit out. That's their pre-season friendly. And the expectation is that not that they're at the top level. It can still take them a couple of matches, but it's just the nature of the breaks that they get now. But historically, I would have had a number of seasons where I was back late because I was away touring with Ireland or whatever, and my first game could have been round 2 or 3 in the league, and some
you
guys
probably rarely
late.
started as well. You come off the bench for 20 minutes.
Yeah. Sometimes you might start, but then you're probably a 60-minute job or 50-60 minutes, so the expectation isn't there. But like, with all due respect to those league games at a time, you have to start somewhere. it's not a European Cup game, or it's not an international, or it's not the high intensity of a line series. You need to be battle hardened, and you need to build that cohesion and connection with your teammates. And you're a team that, look, of course, the counter argument is, well, these are 4 countries coming together. They need this sort of preparation, whereas Australia wouldn't know a lot of their systems, and they hadn't played really. They hadn't played since the previous November, the end of season, the previous November. So it's a lot to get back up and running really quickly. And I think that was a problem for the first test. The Lions were very, very good, to be fair, and so dominant in the collisions and really physical. But it could have been different. But take all that away, and we can talk about preparation and the what ifs. I still think, even if Australia won that second test, you would have seen a different Lions team on Saturday night in Sydney. I'm not saying they were guaranteed a win, but I think they would have won. They didn't have to win, did they? And it has an effect.
We'll never know. Never know.
Well, yeah, they didn't have to win. I think
I get what you're saying.
That's part of the problem as well, and that's why the biggest challenge to win a series 3-0 is it's so hard to do. I thought he picked the team, and again, there's no point in going back saying, some people have read it over the weekend since the game that, oh, maybe he should have freshened up the team and put another 4 or 5 guys in there. Again, it could have worked. Who knows? But most of the credit has to go to Australia here. They didn't allow the Lions play. They adapted to conditions better. And again, the perception before the game is, God, this weather might suit the Lions team a little bit better. And we know Australia haven't overpowered them in these first two games. They found sparkle, really brilliant moments in that second test with some of the tries they scored. But that fear isn't there that, it's going to be a fair bit of kicking here. There's going to be a lot of one-out runners. There's going to be physical close encounters. Well, you think the Lions are probably that suit them a little bit better in this game. But Australia were the ones that were really, really physical. And I thought, Nick Frost in their second row, he's not the bulkiest guy. He's a big, tall, rangy, athletic player. He was outstanding with their line out. Tom Hooper at 6 for Australia, Valentini went out and Hooper had an outstanding game. For the Lions, you go through their players and you think, who are the ones that really stood out here? I think Ty Byrne had so many big moments, and he was brilliant in the game, even though the Lions were on the back foot a fair bit. He was brilliant. Gibson Park was good.
Tom Curry, a lot more green and gold that stood out.
Yeah, it's just picking out those big performances. And obviously Maro Itoje going off, James Ryan going off, Ollie Chesham going off, Curry went off. There's a fair little bit of chopping and change in there that didn't really suit him. I know that the bench, there was good options off the bench. And I think the game was gone. They won those crucial moments in the game, and they were, you think of Ikitau in the centre and Sualihi, they were brilliant. They were absolutely brilliant the other night, the two of them, and 12 and 13 for Australia. As I said, mentioned some of the, Nick White coming in, he was an absolute nuisance. He was stuck in every sort of a shermuzzle and caused some of them, but he was brilliant for them. And they unsettled and frustrated the Lions a little bit there. But look, the job was done.
Overall, Alan, if we look to the team in red and the tours, Andy Farrell, the big decisions, they worked from, he started with Tag Byrne in that first test. Pretty much a lot of people said he shouldn't have done that. Then he backed Curry as well. And 3 weeks later, they're both extremely good, and Tag Byrne won Player of the Series. And even he was joking in the press conference saying he wanted to be a Lion in 4 years' time. And Andy Farrell said, I'll retire you next year, which just shows the relationship and the friendship as well. That's a professionalism they both have. But again, Andy Farrell got a spot on in Test 1 and 2.
Yeah, he did. And maybe not in Test 3. I think if Andy had his time back, maybe he...
well, he answered that as well. He says, I heard one of the journalists said, do you think psychologically, because you know you've won the series, it affects you. And he just replied, it was actually quite short of him, but in a good way. He just said, I hope not. I picked a team to win and the training was good. But there you go. That's what happens.
Yeah, I think if you look back now, and it's not a criticism of Andy Farrell, I think Duhan van der Merwe would have been good to see. Would it have been good to see him try and finish and say, I'm a test line. He was in South Africa. I haven't got the opportunity. Josh van der Fleer, Scott Cummings, Mac Hansen, maybe there's a few there that maybe were a little bit frustrated. And you know, I went to a World Cup in 07 in France, and I remember going up to Eddie O'Sullivan after, you know, 3 games against Argentina, and Stephen Ferris was the same. And we just said, look, we've got to beat Argentina by a bonus point try here. It's going to be very difficult because Argentina were very strong. We'd come off a loss against France the week before, and I remember just throwing myself and Fez in there. We'll bring so much energy, aggression.
What was the response?
I think he listened, but he thought that the backward that were there, that were tried and trusted, would deliver, and they were top quality players. So it wasn't a case of, oh, we're better than them. But I remember thinking in my own head, just give us a chance here, and we're just going to, for our own selves, we're going to go out and try and show people what kind of players we are and what we can do. And I just think maybe afterwards the other night, I was just thinking maybe some of these guys would have loved to have said, make me a test line. I'm going to go out against Australia here, and I'll make sure that I'm going to lift the group around me. You know, there's always a natural dip when you win something like that. That's why it's hard to win back-to-back trophies with any team in any sport. That is the reality. Sports psychologists are constantly trying to, you know, get players into that mindset. When you win something, how do you create that hunger and desire again? Obviously, some of that comes from the individual, as the pride in yourself. The world is watching. You enhance your reputation, all that kind of stuff. And there's no Lions player went out in the field the other night thinking, "Oh God, this is just going to happen." But as I said, it's just that small little dip, and the opposition then were really up for it. So you throw in hindsight, you throw in 4 or 5 guys, giving them a chance, and maybe it would have worked. Maybe it wouldn't have. We'll never know. I thought the team he picked the other day was the right team. So that sounds crazy. I'm not saying that he should have made the change, because I agreed with the team. I thought, you know, keep the continuity. You have to earn these test places. You're not kind of going. And he based his decisions on a team that showed him that they were ready to go and deliver. And it kind of finished
previously.
They won the series, and they deserve credit for that, because but the reality here is they finished on a bit of a negative, which opens the door to question marks. How good is this Lions team? Will it be remembered? They were supposed to win 3-0. They could have lost it last week. Very little between it. They lost, you know, 5 of the halves out of 6.
Is it really cheap for us to say?
Absolutely. It is cheap, and it's a load of rubbish, to be honest, because they got the job done. I think they dominated the first match. They switched off a little bit for the last 20 minutes. It happens where the opposition comes back. No matter who you're playing at any level, it does happen. Game 2, I think Australia got a couple of crucial moments, played really well, but the Lions, some things went wrong for them, and they still won the game. I always felt in that second test that Australia were hanging on, and they were for long periods in that second half. So it's very easy to create that narrative that, oh, this Lions, it could have been so much different. You know, they won the first 2 games. We talk about the preparation. You 4 countries coming together there, and it's. I'm not saying it's not easy. It's not easy to get that game plan together, to get that continuity. They had a big build up to it, but the strength of the players they had was very, very high. But piecing it all together, Andy Farrell did that really well. And to be honest, you know, the last game, Australia so much desperation to try and get a result, and they did that.
What about, yes, we talked about Tadhg, the Curry, Tom Curry. Who else did you like? Who else did the Dogs like? A bit of standout players for you, Alan. Obviously, Hugo Keenan, like he'll go in Lions history, as will they all do, but scoring that winning try in Test 2 in Melbourne, getting the outside of wickets now after the 6 weeks he had with injury and just a bit of sickness. Like, such delight for him.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Apologies to any of the listeners there with the Dogs. I just can't stop them. But anyway, we'll continue on. Yeah, Hugo Keenan. What a finish for him in that second Test. I think he showed his quality. Andy Farrell backed him again for the third Test. Backed him for that second Test, and he delivered. I think, having that illness in between, but we know how good Hugo Keenan is. We don't have to, you don't have to kind of reinforce that. I think Blair Kinghorn is an outstanding player as well, and for Hugo to start the 3 Test games was massive for him. Blair Kinghorn, obviously, it didn't help his cause that he picked up that injury either, but we're talking about Irish players here because we have to, and they're the ones who stood out. Tadhg Beirne was outstanding. He got Player of the Series. Finn Russell shared it with the Howden Player of the Series, but I think Tadhg Beirne deserved it. I think he was brilliant. I think he was brilliant in defeat the other night. His energy, and I don't know where he gets it from, but
380 minutes as well.
Yeah, and there was so many moments even in the game the other night when the Lions were on the back foot a bit that he was just so close to getting crucial turnovers, made some vital tackles. He's just a brilliant rugby player, a brilliant athlete, and he looks like he could go again for another 80 minutes after the final whistle. Tom Curry was really good, and I think there was a good bit of debate about that back row situation with Jack Morgan. Tom Curry was outstanding. I think Josh van der Fleer, from an Irish point of view, was obviously unlucky, but it was incredibly high quality players in front there. Jack Conan, rock solid, brilliant carries, had a really good series as well. So Finn Russell, a little bit of a mixed bag the other night, but I think he brought that little bit of a panache and excitement. Tommy Freeman was quiet, I think. Yeah, it was quiet and top quality
Gary
player.
Ringrose
I'm a big
going
fan of his. Yeah, and Gary Ringrose was very unlucky. Ellis Genge, brilliant. He's battled with Porter. I think Porter was really good as well. So, yeah, there's no players here that you think
maybe slightly ahead of Porter in your eyes over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think the way he's played. Yeah, but look, I just find it very difficult to kind of go
sort of thing.
Yeah, you are, and I think some people would argue if you're English that he's better than Porter. Irish, Porter's play around the field is just phenomenal. I think sometimes the scrums go a little bit awry and he can get pinged, Andrew Porter, but I just think he's a fantastic player. And, he started Test 2 and 3, Genge started the first one, and it was a great luxury for Andy Farrell to have top quality world-class players. But yeah, I think they'd be disappointed. They'd be very relieved. I think they were quite relaxed after the game. There wasn't this incredibly long faces on the Lions players. They were pleased, and they were good winners the week before, and I think they were good losers last week. They gave the credit to Australia that they deserved, and I think we have to mention Joe Schmidt as well. To put that strategy to play and guide his team to get that level on Saturday night in horrendous conditions with the break in the game as well, has to be commended.
Well, Al, thanks for your summary there and your work over the season. It's a long old season, but we got there. The Lions win in Australia, and we will be back sort of September, October time to kick off the new season. Thanks very much, Al. Chat to you soon.
Cheers. Thanks, George.